So I would like to begin my talk. It seems that most of you speak German, but, well, as not in Germany here, I will talk in English, if that's okay.
Maybe you can talk. We are two from Holland. We speak Duits.
Anybody who prefers English to German? Yeah. Okay, so that's one more person than necessary for me to speak German. So I will speak in English. If you want to hear me in German, I will be in Bonn, in Trier, and Köln next couple of days. Or you can hear me on YouTube. What I said in Stuttgart, Heidelberg, and Nürnberg is all on YouTube. So there might be some other guys interested in my English. My voice is not the best, so if you have difficulties to hear me, there's still one chair here. I'll try my best to reach you down there. I hope you can hear me. How many sessions did we have so far in the Netherlands?
5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah. So it's not a real session, but it's 1 day Zazen. It's probably, the oldest of those sessions or Zazen days that I do in Europe. The first time was 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And I know Esther, or she knows me, I think, from German TV. And she sent me a newspaper that she was kind of editing at the time, Ben Bama News, which was in Dutch, so I couldn't understand it. But for a while she would send me, each time the newspaper got out, she sent me the newspaper. And I emailed her, thank you for that newspaper, I'm sorry I can't understand, but it's appreciated. And when 10 years ago I came to Europe, and for the first time I did sessions. I put on the Antage homepage, I'm going to be in Europe for a couple of weeks. If you are interested, I'm going to visit your place, then we can do a session together. At the time, Esther invited me to her place in Sinoprel, which is just around the corner from here. And some of you I know from since then. And Esther also did a lot of work translating the Antage homepage into Dutch. And I translated a couple of Dogen's writing into German. I think you got all of that in Dutch as well. So if you look for it, if you're looking for Dogen in Dutch language, you can look in the old part of the Antage homepage in the archive, and you will find these texts. And a couple of years ago, when Esther was working on these translations, she was confronting me with a lot of questions. I don't understand this part, I don't understand that part, can you please explain it? And Esther at the time was thinking of publishing this stuff somewhere here in the Netherlands. And she said, well, Dogen alone will not be enough. You have to give your interpretation, and we need some commentary for these writings. And without Esther giving me that feedback, probably I would never have started to write these commentaries, which then I wrote. First, the intention was that this should be maybe for a Dutch translation of Dogen. But then for some reason the Dutch translation never came out.
Not yet.
Not yet. but instead, based on that material, 6 months ago, in January, in German, the title is called Futter für Pferd und Esel, so food for horse and donkey, came out, which is a translation of basically all of my Dogen material that exists so far in German, plus the commentary that Esther forced me to write. So I thought it would be a waste to just leave it like that. So I said I'll publish that. But there's 2 texts which I did not include, or actually it's 3. One of them might be republished next year in a different book. That's the last text that Dogen wrote It's called 8 Awarenesses of a True Adult. In Japanese, it's Hachidai Ningaku. And there's 2 more very important texts. One is called Shoji, Life and Death. And the other one is called Bodhisattva Shisho, 4 Ways of a Bodhisattva to help other people, or in German I translate it, 4 Weisen eines Bodhisattvas für andere da zu sein. So 4 ways of a Bodhisattvas to be there for other people. I didn't include those texts in the Food for Horse and Donkey book because I knew that I wanted to use them for my new book, which is about love. Some of you have it lying there. The book is about love in all of its meanings, like parents have love for their children, children love their parents. If you grow up in a certain part of a countryside, then you develop love for that home of yours. So there's this kind of love that you grow into, a kind of biological love. Then all of us as teenagers, we wake up to romantic love. This feeling that you finally discovered that missing part in your life, that part that always seemed to be missing, now you finally found it. But then also over time, sometimes you need to discover that this feeling that now I got it, now I found it, I found her, I found him. That also can be an illusion. There is love of like-minded persons. Those can be friends that have the same aim, or it could be teacher and student that also tied by this love of having the same goal, having the same aim in life. And then there's the love that the Greek called agape. That's the love that Jesus talks about in the New Testament. Unconditional love, completely giving oneself. And Christianity talks a lot about love. Like famously, when Jesus was asked about the first commandment, he answered, or in one of the testaments, he asked the person who asked the question, please tell me what you think. And then the other person gives the answer. But basically the answer is, love God with your whole heart and love thy neighbor just as you would love yourself. And probably everybody knows that. So Christianity starts with the love of God and the love of the neighbor. And that's what, well, the religion is centered around. Now, when people think about Buddhism, what is Buddhism about? What's at the center of our practice? Probably, if you ask 10 Buddhists, they will give you 10 different answers. But probably love will not be the first thing that's mentioned. Maybe at some point there will also be some talk about the compassion of a bodhisattva, but that's usually later on. In my case, I was born in a Christian household. Actually, my grandfather was a minister, and I grew up in the church, in the house of the minister until I was 6 years old. So I watched my grandfather doing Mass on Sundays. I was both baptized by my grandfather, and later at age 14 I was confirmed in the Protestant faith. But I always had difficulties, especially with that commandment, love God. Because how can I love God when I don't even know if God exists in the first place? That's quite a lot to ask for. I could imagine it was even harder for the people who lived at the time of Jesus, because at the time of Jesus, people only knew the God of the Old Testament. That's the God who dispelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. The God that drowned mankind in a flood, with the exception of Noah. The God that destroyed the Tower of Babel. The God that sent the Jewish people into slavery. The God that said of himself, I'm jealous, you must not have any God besides me. A God that's more often angry than, well, kind with his people. And still, Jesus says the first commandment is you need to love this God with your whole heart. If I had been a Jew at his time, I would have said, why? What did God ever do for us? When I was a kid, it was less what did God ever do for me than this doubt that probably everyone has at a certain time, as a teenager also, maybe earlier. Usually as a kid, when it gets December, you can't wait until Santa Claus comes on the 24th in January in Germany. He's coming on the 24th of December, Heiligabend, on Eve. And I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, I heard someone knock on the door. And when I opened, just as I'd expected, there was Santa Claus with his red hat and his white beard. And in one hand he carried that big bag, and I hoped there would be a present in there for me too. And in the other hand he has this thing that, well, looks like a broom, or basically it's more or less like something like a broom, with whom Santa Claus supposedly beats your behind if you didn't behave. I don't know if that's the same in here in the Netherlands, but basically in Germany, Santa has these two sides to himself. A nice, kind Santa, and you write a list of wishes for that Santa. But then there's also the Santa that punishes the bad boys. Anyway, when I was 5 years old, Santa stands in front of the door and asks Olaf, that was my name at the time, Olaf, were you a good boy this year? And I wasn't quite sure. So I said, yes, maybe. And Santa looks up to my mother and says, Mom, is that true? Did he really behave? And my mother said, I think he could do better, but... Well, this year, in German you would say, close both eyes. Let's close both eyes and pretend he has been a good boy. And maybe you can give him this present anyway. And when I saw the exchange between the two, my mom and Santa Claus, I suddenly realized that's not Santa Claus, that's my Uncle Peter who's living next door. And from then on, it was hard for me to kind of deal with the fact, for example, my grandmother insisted that every day at lunchtime, my grandfather would make a prayer to God. And my grandfather actually was less pious than my grandmother. My grandmother was the one that was a kind of pious Christian. My grandfather was more like typical post-war leftist Protestant minister. I don't know if you have them in the Netherlands too, but that's kind of the typical kind of social democratic minister who understands Christianity basically as a form of practice solidarity between, well, me and the neighbor. So for my grandfather, probably God was not something that existed somewhere. It was solidarity, or love between equals. So my grandfather wasn't so much into this prayer before mealtime anyway, but he did it as his wife just insisted on him. And he would always do the shortest prayer he knew, which was all eyes wait upon you. You open your hand and everything is filled with Wohlgefallen in German, pleasure. You fill everything with pleasure when you open your eyes. And this always reminded me of Santa Claus. Well, who are you talking about? I mean, the grandmother put the meal on the table. She bought the stuff in the supermarket. The supermarket gets it from the farmers. Where does God come to play here? So when I was 14 and confirmed, I didn't really have so deep belief in God anymore. With the second part of Jesus' commandment, love your neighbor as you would love yourself, I thought that was kind of cool. That makes sense. I mean, we're all equals as humans. We're all equal, so it makes sense that we should love each other as we would love ourselves. Although I had difficulties with that part as well, insofar as I wasn't actually sure if my life was worth living in the first place. That has to do with the fact that my mother died when I was 7. And so ever since I was in elementary school, when I came home from school, my mother wasn't there, my father was still at work. I would basically sit in my room during the afternoons and think. And what I thought was, if I have to die anyway, why do I have to live? What's the point? I'm going to die anyway. And people say the point of going to school is to get an education and to find a job. And people say that the point of finding a job is to earn money. And people say that the point of earning money is to start a family and have children one day yourself. But still, what's the point? I'm going to die, my children will die, my grandchildren will die. Why would I want to do that and live until the age of 80 or 90 or 100? Wouldn't it be much easier if I hadn't been born in the first place? Well, of course, it's now too late to return to the womb of my mother. But I can still commit suicide. The only thing that kept me back was the thought that maybe if I commit suicide, I might have regrets. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure that suicide would be the end of everything, so there would be no more suffering. But who knows? Who knows? I might regret and want to come back. It's not possible. So if I commit suicide today, I won't have another option tomorrow. If I don't commit suicide today, I will still suffer, but I still have the option to commit suicide tomorrow. So let's wait one day. Let's wait another day. And at the age of 14, I was kind of still in that mode. So I wasn't so much into Christianity, but I mean, without the idea of God, it seemed to make sense that we all should be loving each other just as we love ourselves, except that the final answer, well, why do I have in the first place? That wasn't there. But I mean, Christianity as a religion is not too bad, I thought. And as everybody in my class, all of my friends were confirming as Christians, I decided to also do it. Also because I had heard from older friends that you would get pocket money from all your uncles and aunts when you do it. And that could be hundreds or even thousands of marks at the time. So a lot of money involved there. And also, only when you confirm, you're allowed to participate in, what's that called in English? The Abendmahl.
Supper, Holy Supper.
Holy Supper?
Oh no.
Agape. Oh, that's interesting because it's the same thing as love. Sharing, receiving the body of Christ in the form of very thin bread and no communion.
Eucharist.
Okay, so there's lots of words for it, but you know what I mean. What I mean is that at one part during Sunday Mass, you get this very thin piece of bread. And in Germany, there's a difference between the Catholics and the Protestants. With the Catholic Church, obviously, it's only the priest who's allowed to drink the wine. In the Protestant Church, all of the believers can take a sip of the wine, except for the non-confirmed. So basically, the kids cannot drink the wine, but when you're 14 and you're confirmed, you can drink the wine. So I wanted to drink wine as well, as the adults do. And according to German law, if you're 16, you can drink alcohol, or at least beer and wine, without the permission of your parents. But if you're 14, you can only with the permission of the parents. So I thought, well, if I confirm, then I can finally drink beer and wine as the others do. Anyway, I was confirmed, so I was a full-fledged Christian at age 14, but I still wasn't quite sure how I could love a God whom I wasn't sure existed, and how I could love my neighbor when I couldn't even love myself so much. And when I was 16, my father sent me to a boarding school, which was a Christian boarding school. Actually, one of the, teachers at the boarding school is sitting here right now. Thanks to him, I got into contact with Zen in the first place. Of course, I couldn't know that would happen, so that wasn't really the reason why I entered that boarding school. There's a story which, until now, I haven't really talked about so much during talks, but you can find it in that new book in detail. Basically, to get into that boarding school, you had to, is that Pentecosta in English? Pfingsten? There's a 1 week Pentecosta holiday in Germany, and during that 1 week, there was people who wanted to get into the boarding school were invited to go there and participate in the class for 1 week. And next to me, there was this very pretty girl sitting there, also sent there by her parents that wanted her to go to that boarding school. And we took classes together in the morning. And in the evening, when I was sitting in my room together with another boy, preparing for the next day, somebody was knocking on the door, and it was this pretty girl that had been sitting next to me in the morning. And the boy who was sharing the room with me, probably he understood what is going on there, so he left and said, I'm going to take a walk. And I'm sitting there with the girl on my bed, and we talk about each other, and we talk about life and this and that. And at one point, there's nothing more to talk about. And we sit there for a while silently, and maybe I was starting to bore her. Maybe she had fallen asleep. I feel her head leaning against my shoulder. And I was turning around towards her, and then she was kissing me out of the blue. And to me, it was like an angel had descended from the heavens, because until then, I'd been always this dark, depressed teenager who was too shy to even talk to girls. I was interested in girls, but I was always too shy to talk to girls. Everybody had a girlfriend. I never had a girlfriend. And then there's this beautiful girl kissing me out of the blue. And out of a sudden, the world seemed to be a different world. I mean, of course, nothing had objectively changed, but it wasn't the same world anymore. And, well, when I came back from that Pentecostal holidays to my home in southern Germany, and my father asked me, well, how's that school? Do you think it would be good for you to go there? I said, yes, it's a great school. I must go there. I must go there. And so I went there after summer holidays, and to my big regret or surprise, the girl wasn't there. She wasn't there. Well, but she lived in Hanover, which is not too far from Braunschweig. So we would see ourselves from time to time on the weekends. We would write ourselves letters. And on and off, it went on and off for about 8 years that we would see each other and were in love and out of love with each other. So, I mean, that was, honestly speaking, the main reason why I went to the boarding school. And then at the boarding school, well, his name is Hubert, he's sitting there. He started for the kids at the boarding school, he started this circle which he reminded me of today in the morning. So I got that information wrong in the book. In the book I said it was called Meditation in the Style of Zen. It was Christian meditation in the style of Zen. I don't know why he named it like that. My thinking was, well, it's a Christian school, and meditation didn't have a good name at the time. People were suspicious. And I was suspicious at the time. I had never meditated, but I heard from friends whose friends were into transcendental meditation, and they're supposed to levitate, for example. And I thought, well, that's nonsense. And at the time, he was still called the Bhagwan. He was all over the TV, and he had these orange-clothed followers, and he was sitting in a Rolls Royce, and he was not attached to his Rolls Royce, of course, but obviously the idea was that he should have 365 Rolls Royces, so he could sit in a different one every day of the year. And so meditation had this strange flavor to it, at least in my mind, and maybe also in the mind of the school authorities. So when you label it as Christian meditation, it doesn't sound so bad, in the style of Zen. Okay. But anyway, Zen, Z-E-N, I hadn't heard about that. I didn't know what it was. It was something Far Eastern, obviously. So when Hubert asked me, would you be interested in this? I said, no, I'm not. And then it was okay for a while, but I think in the beginning there were not many attendees for the meditation. There were not so many kids in the beginning. So after 2 or 3 weeks, Hubert comes again and says, so why not? I mean, try it. I said, no, I'm not into meditation. I don't like this. I'm not interested. And Hubert asked me, so you have tried it already? I said, no, of course not, and I have no intentions to do so. And then he says, well, if you haven't tried it once, how do you know you're not interested? Try it once, and then you can tell me if you like it or not. But if without trying once, you can't possibly know if that's the thing for you or not. And I didn't know what to say against that. Yeah, at least in theory, it made sense. I need to try it once, and then I can tell him I'm not interested. And that was what I was planning to do. I said, okay, next time, tonight, in the evening, I'm going to attend. And then I can stop if I want to. And she says, yes, of course, if you want to, you can stop. And as a result of that sitting, I'm sitting here today. So obviously it didn't work as I thought. Like, well, today in the morning, we were talking about smoking. And what did I say? Kind of, the first step is the hardest, but then kind of everything else just happens by itself. And with the Zen, it can be the same. Like at the beginning, you don't know, well, should I do it? Should I not do it? But then it's, well, I never had a connection with smoking. But maybe it's the same with smoking. You do it once, you do it a second time, and then you can't quit anymore. So what was so good about Zen for me? Well, I've been probably telling this story a number of times, but I'm going to tell it once more. When you asked me at age 16, where are you? Who are you? I would have pointed to my head and said, the guy who's thinking here, that's me. And the rest of my body, everything that comes below my neck, well, I need that to keep my brain alive. I need my lungs to get oxygen. I need my heart to pump the oxygen up here. But if medical research makes more progress and you could cut off this head and plant it on a robot, well, I would be okay with that, I would have thought. Who cares? Who cares what's below here? The guy who's thinking up here, that's what matters. So during class in school, most of the time I was sitting there like this, or sitting on my chair like that. And sometimes the teachers would say, well, you have a bad posture. And I would reply, well, who cares? Why would you care if I listen to what you say and if I can have good grades at the end of the year? Who cares about my posture at the table? And most of the time, the teachers would leave it at that. And doing Zazen for the first time in my life, I realized, oh, it makes a difference. I'm a different person. When I sit like this for 5 minutes, it's not the same as if I sit like this. And when you sit there, as you all know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're quiet, you hear sounds that were there all the time, but you didn't notice them. You hear the sound of the wind, the sound of the rain, the sound of birds. For 16 years I've been breathing. I had understood that I need oxygen and that's why I have lungs, but I never felt the breath going out, coming in. Was the first time I realized, oh, I'm actually breathing, or something is breathing there. Something is breathing there, and that's part of my life. So in the beginning, it was this realization. There's so many things around me, happening around me, that I hadn't been aware of. Probably because I've always been thinking up in here and didn't notice. I didn't bother to notice. So for 1 year, I was there almost every time. And after 1 year, when I was 17, Hubert quit the school. And, well, I don't know exactly what reasons there were. There were several reasons, I guess. But the circle, the meditation circle, Christian meditation in the style of Zen, that should continue. But there were other teachers that were into this. So for some reason, Hubert came to my room and said, Olaf, would you be interested in continuing with this circle? And I was surprised because after each of the sittings, Hubert would talk with us, participants. And he would ask us, well, how was it for you? Was there something special or whatever? And a lot of the participants had something to tell. Like one person would see themselves walk over a beautiful meadow with flowers. And Hubert would say, oh, that's great, beautiful, beautiful. One person would see a golden pendulum swinging in their center, somewhere in the center of themselves. And again, Hubert was, oh, great, great. That's so beautiful. And I was also amazed, wow, why doesn't that happen to me? And when Hubert asked me, how was it for you? I said, yeah, it was great. I would like to come again, but there's still nothing, no experience. So there's no Zen experience yet, but I'll try my best. And then at 17, I still didn't have any experience except breathing and the sound of the wind, the sound of the rain, feeling of my posture, which was great, but there must be more to this, I thought. So when Hubert said, would you be willing to do it? I said, yes, of course, but I wasn't sure if I can do it. So I went to the library and I got all the books about Zen I could find. There are books about Buddhism because I thought maybe I can find something that can replace the experience. And so I read about the life of the Buddha. The first time I heard about this Indian prince who didn't want to become king, as his father wanted him to do. Famous Siddhartha, who later became the Buddha Shakyamuni, decided at one point of his life to leave the palace because for him life was suffering. That's the kind of famous first truth of Buddhism. Life is suffering, or maybe in a more toned down version would be life is not satisfactory. It's not necessarily suffering, but you're never completely satisfied in life. The Buddha would ask himself, why is that the case? Where is that non-satisfactoriness coming from? Where's the suffering coming from? That question was strong enough to let him give up becoming the king, disappoint his parents, leave the palace, leave actually his wife and his only son to meditate under a tree. And they say that he finally found the answer there. And then he would for 40 years travel India, teach it in words and demonstrate it through sitting. And this first truth of Buddhism, life is suffering, is something that seems to be repelling for many people. They say, well, why is Buddhism such a negative religion? Isn't life wonderful? Isn't it great that we live in this world? And of course, there are sometimes bad days, but on the whole, life is wonderful, isn't it? And for me, it was more like for the first time I had found a soulmate. Finally, somebody tells the truth. Somebody tells it as it is. Life is suffering. That's how it felt for me all the time. Since, well, probably the time I lost my mother and I spent all these long afternoons and weekends in my room thinking about the meaning of life, and nobody could answer me. Nobody could give me the answer. And they say that Buddha found the answer under the tree while meditating. So if that's the case, I'm going to go do that too. And according to the books of D.T. Suzuki that I found in the library, Zen meditation, so basically seated meditation, was brought from India to China by Bodhidharma, and then 800 years ago before now, it was brought from China to Japan. And today, you can still find enlightened Zen masters if you look for them. So, at age 17 or 18, I really didn't have anything else in my life that I really wanted to do. I was still not sure if life was worth living in the first place. So, when I read these books, and after having done Zazen for a year or two, I thought I knew I'd found what I've been looking for. I need to become a Zen monk in Japan. So after I graduate from high school, I'm going to go to Japan and become a monk. And Hubert wasn't at the school anymore, but some of us from the Zen circle would be meeting him a number of times, visiting with him. And when I visited him at one point, I was 17, maybe 18, and I told him about my dream. I'm going to become a Zen monk in Japan. So after I graduate from high school, I'm going to go to Japan and find an enlightened Zen master and stay there until I'm enlightened too. I was surprised that Hubert, who had insisted that I do meditation, he said, wait a minute. I see that you are very enthusiastic and right now you're really burning with that wish. that you want to dedicate yourself to the Zen way. But who knows, in 3 years, in 5 years, you might change your mind. There's so many people who go to the East and they get, how do you say, disillusioned there. They realized over there also, I can't find the thing that I was looking for. But then they can't come back because they haven't learned anything. They haven't trained for a job. So before you go to Japan, you should first go to university, so that when you come back to Germany, if you want to come back to Germany, you can have a job. Maybe you can also study Japanese at the university. That would prepare you for your stay. And, well, probably I'm somebody who's easily influenced by other people's opinions. So I decided I go to university. That's what I did. And at age 22, I went for 1 year to Kyoto. I was surprised there's so many Zen temples in Kyoto, but almost none where you can go as a layperson, as a student, to train with the monks. So there's very few Zen temples where they meditate regularly in the first place, but these are very, how do you say, they close their doors to the outside. So it's very hard to get into these Zen temples in Kyoto. But I found one Soto temple where I was allowed to do sesshin every month. And there I heard rumors about Antaiji, which is a kind of day trip from Kyoto. It's up to the northern coast. And one of the priests said, I can give you an introduction. And through that introduction in 1990, for the first time, I got to Antaiji. The first thing that the priest there asked me is, what have you come for? And I said, I've come here to learn something about Buddhism. And the priest said, we are not a school. This is not a school. You have to create Antaiji. And that had a big impact on me. I was still 22. I knew nothing basically about Buddhism and Zen. And he tells me, you create Antaiji. You create this place. So it's up to you what you can learn here. And in Christianity, there's one God who's the Father, but also the Son and the Holy Spirit. So there's 3 persons, but one God, basically. In Buddhism, there's only one Buddha, one might think. That's Shakyamuni. But actually, when you go to a Buddhist country, you're surprised how many Buddhas there are. There's Shakyamuni, there's Amitabha, there's Vairocana, there's lots of Buddhas, actually. And there's lots of Bodhisattvas. And that's the same for the Zen temples in Japan. I was surprised that they even had a Hindu deity in front of the toilet. So when you go to the toilet to do your business, first you have to bow to that Hindu deity. And then when you get out again, you bow to that deity. Before you enter the bath, to take a bath in the afternoon, there's a bodhisattva that's responsible for the bath. Only, there's a special bath bodhisattva. I was surprised and kind of wondering, why do they have so many Buddhas and bodhisattvas here? And I asked the head of the temple, the abbot, what's the one main Buddha here? Who's the real Buddha? And the abbot would say, you. If you don't become a Buddha here, there's no Buddha anywhere. And that again also inspired me a lot. Oh, it's about me. I'm kind of here in the center of the practice. It's all about my problem and if I can get enlightenment or not. And after 6 months, I went back to Germany to finish my studies. But then at age 25, I went back to Antaiji to become a monk and realized my dream of finding the answer to all the questions I had. And when you're a monk, then of course you have to meditate with the community every morning, every evening. In Antaiji, there's a 5-day session at the beginning of each month, and then there's 1-day sessions on the 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th. So there's 9 days of session, and the rest of the month is a lot of meditation, but during the daytime agricultural work, because the monastery is self-sufficient, so we plant our own rice, vegetables. And also cooking is an important part of the practice. Dogen, who founded Soto Zen in Japan, actually wrote a whole small book about the practice of the cook and the mind that a cook needs to have. And it's from this small book, which is called Tenzo Kyokun in Japanese, instructions for the book, from which the title of my new book comes. The ocean does not reject any of the rivers. That's a metaphor with which Dogen expresses big mind, magnanimous mind, which is one of the minds that Tenzo needs to have. Basically what the metaphor stands for is that during the day, during our whole life, we're always confronted with a lot of stuff that we would rather not accept. Also with the people with whom we share our lives. Some of them we get along very well, but some of them we would rather, well, not have to deal with. Or, yeah, on a sunny day everybody feels fine, but on a rainy day sometimes you wish, oh, why can't it be such a nice sunny day as the day before, whatever. And when you're the cook, at least that was the case in my case, if it's a rainy day and everybody else is working outside, you don't complain about being in the kitchen and working when everybody else is getting wet. But if it's the other way around, it's a sunny day, everybody seems to enjoy themselves out there in the fields, why do I have to be back here in the kitchen and cook for these guys? Or it's a cold winter day and they have a stove in the Zen hall, but there's no stove in the kitchen. So I asked myself, why do I have to cook here in the cold? Why these guys are probably sleeping there next to the stove. And I'm preparing the kitchen, I'm preparing the breakfast. Also, as the cook, you need to use the vegetables that are in season. You cannot choose what you want to cook. You need to use what the guys bring you from the fields, and that's not necessarily what you would like to use. So you need a big mind, a mind that can accept what you have to deal with. And I was lacking that mind. I was also lacking the joyful mind that Dogen talks about. Dogen says in the Tenzo Kyokun, you should be happy about not being born into the heavenly realms. The heavenly realms are the highest of the 6 Buddhist realms. As human beings, we're in the 2nd highest, the human realm. The lowest is hell. So according to Buddhism, hell is not eternal, but in hell you're suffering from day to night. You're burning on hot coals, or you're lying on a bed of nails, whatever. There's actually several hells. It's not fun to be born in hell. Then there's the realm of the hungry ghosts who are always hungry, but even if there's a piece of cake in front of them, it doesn't pass through their mouth. So they're always hungry, but even if they finally found something to eat, it doesn't fill them because it doesn't pass through their neck. That's the hungry ghosts. And there are the animals, whom we all know. Most of the day they just follow their instincts, their desires. When they're hungry, they eat. When they're horny, they copulate. And then when they have satisfied their desires, they sleep. And when they wake up, they eat again, they copulate again, sleep again. So basically slaves of their desires, that's the animals. Then there are the angry demons who are always driven by their hate, their inner hate, anger against other beings. So they're always in a state of war. And in the fifth realm, as human beings, we're actually not so different from the other realms as you might have realized by yourself. Sometimes we live like hungry ghosts, always trying to get something that we never get, or when we think we got it, it still doesn't satisfy us. We live like animals, slaves of our desires, and often we are like angry demons as well. But as human beings, sometimes we wake up and realize, oh, I'm allowing myself to be a slave. And a lot of the suffering that I, as a human being, also experience, the reason for that is in myself. I'm causing my own suffering. And as humans, we have the option to sit down on a cushion and just watch reality as it is. That's something that's not an option in the other realms. And in the highest realm, in heaven, everything is fine. Everything is fine. It's like what in German we call Schlaraffenland. You lie down in the sun, you open your mouth, and then fried chicken flies into your mouth. That's the heavenly realms. And Dogen says, be happy that you're not there. Why? Why should we be happy to not be in the heavenly realm? Because there's no Zazen practice there, because there's no suffering. We never ask ourselves, well, who am I? How should I live? How does reality function? In the heavenly realms, we're always in the state of, well, dizzy happiness, but we never return to, or we never actually have the opportunity to ask yourself, well, what is this all about? So Dogen says, as a cook, you're not in heaven. You should be happy about that. You should be joyful about the fact that you're not in heaven. You have difficult times there. You have problems to deal with. Good. That's good. You should be joyful about that. And you should have the mind of a parent. That's the third mind. Joyful mind, parental mind, big mind. The mind of a parent. You should imagine, even though usually monks, they don't have children by themselves. Well, imagine you were a mother who's cooking for her only child. You don't ask that child, what does the child for me? When I feed the child, when I change the diapers, you don't expect anything in return. As the cook, usually, or at least often, you ask yourself, well, I'm doing all this here in the kitchen for them. What do they for me? They're out there in the sun enjoying themselves. Nobody's helping me. When you're in that state, you should remind yourself of parental mind. And when I was 25, I had heard about Dogen and his writings in theory, but in practice, I had none of that. So when I was the cook for the first time, in the mornings and the evenings, it's rice and soup and vegetable dishes. And at noon, often it's noodles. And in Japan, they have these so-called udon noodles, which are kind of similar to spaghetti. And so the first day, I made them like spaghetti al dente. And I thought that would be good, but the Japanese say no. Japanese udon, they're a little bit softer. Then they're not spaghetti al dente. Make them softer tomorrow. So the next day, I decided, no, I'm going to make them real soft so that they're happy. So I boiled them for 30 minutes and they dissolved. And of course, nobody was happy about that. And basically every day I get yelled at. And at one point I said, I didn't come to Japan to learn how to cook. I came here to practice Zen meditation and to study the Buddhist teaching. And my teacher, who happened to be there and hear that, said, it's not about you. You don't count at all. And that came as a shock to me, because he had said, you create Antaiji. If you don't become the Buddha, there's no Buddha. I thought it's all about me. How could it be not about me? So I needed some time to realize that actually these are two sides of one coin. You need to forget yourself, let go of yourself to create the place and to manifest Buddha. As long as you think, I'm here to become a Buddha, I already have some experiences. I'm already half Buddha, 3/4 of Buddha. But finally, I'm the Buddha. I wouldn't call that a Buddha. Only if you completely forget about yourself. Maybe somebody has somewhere in their mind, oh, maybe that's actually a Buddha. The person himself might not even think about it. So whatever, that's probably I told the same story here already, but that's the two most important things that I got from my teacher. You create Anteile, but you don't count it all. And up to now, there wasn't much talk about love or compassion, which is often the Buddhist term that we prefer to love. Because love can have something very possessive. Obsessive. I love you, but only if you believe in my gods. Only if you listen to what I say. If you do this and this and this. I love you, but only if you behave the way I want you to behave. That's often it starts at home. Sometimes parents are obsessive like that. They love their children, or at least they think they love their children, but they don't love them the way they are, but the way they want them to be. And also when religions talk about love, sometimes it has this possessive tone to it. Love your neighbor, but real love of the neighbor means to make part of your religion. And if your neighbor doesn't want that, then love of the enemy can mean to kill the enemy. So better kill the enemy than to allow him to fall into hell because he believes in the wrong God. Sometimes love can have this possessive tone to it. So in Buddhism, we prefer to talk about compassion. Or actually, there's 4 words in Buddhism that correspond to what in Christianity would call agape. I forgot the Indian terms now, or the first 2 would be metta, which is probably the most famous word, and it's often translated as compassion. The second is karuna, which I don't know how you would translate it in English. Kind love. In German, we often say Mitleid for compassion, but there's another word which is maybe better, which is Mitgefühl. Mitgefühl means to feel with somebody. Mitleid means to suffer with somebody. Mitgefühl is maybe better because we not only suffer with others, but we should try to also share the joy with others. And actually this difference that you would have in German between Mitgefühl, compassion, and Mitleid, sharing the suffering, is the difference between metta and karuna. In the East, or at least in Japan, it's often explained as fatherly love and motherly love. Fatherly love is the love that kind of tries to pull the other ahead and tries to motivate the other. It's kind of an active love. That's metta. And karuna is the motherly love, so-called motherly love, that suffers when the child cries, the child has fallen, the child cries, the mother suffers with her child, shares the pain of the child. That's karuna. That's the second love. Then there's a third love that would be being joyful about something positive that happens to another person. I don't know if it's the same here in the Netherlands. Sometimes in Anglo-Saxon countries, when they characterize the Germans, they point to the fact that in German we have the word Schadenfreude, which means to be happy about somebody else's, what do you say? Trouble or misfortune. Somebody is misfortunate, but because it's not you, it's somebody else. Somewhere in your mind you feel happy about it. Good that it's not me, good that it's him. Or you compare yourself, and usually in normal life we often feel like losers, but if there's somebody who is even a bigger loser than ourselves that helps us to feel okay about ourselves. Good to see that loser there. I'm still. Okay, so Schadenfreude is a German word which describes exactly the opposite of what the third Buddhist love about is. It's about being happy about somebody being lucky. For example, if somebody wins the lottery, but it's not you. If you also bought a ticket, you might feel, yeah, actually, oh, why it's not me? I also bought this ticket. I've been buying a ticket to the lottery all these years, and I never won the lottery. Now this guy, he buys the ticket for the first time. Why did he win? And it's the opposite. You didn't win anything, but you're happy that somebody else has a good time. That's the third Buddhist love. And the fourth is maybe the most difficult to understand. It's equanimity. A mind that lets go. And that means letting the other be the way the other is and letting yourself be the way you are. So I say it's difficult to understand because we miss this positive side that we have in Christianity, which is probably the closest to the first Buddhist love, where you positively try to help somebody, pull them in the right direction. Buddhism kind of goes the other way around. You start with a positive love, fatherly love, then you have motherly love, you go to those who have pain, share the pain, then you feel joy about good things that are not happening to you but to others. And last, you accept things as they are and you see that they're good the way they are. From a Christian perspective, we might think there's something missing there. But on the other hand, from a Buddhist perspective, Christian love, sometimes there's a little bit too much there. I'm going to help you. Let me help you. Sometimes, for example, there's the Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on your door. And these people, I mean, they honestly want your best. But you say, yeah, thank you for your love. But, and that's not only about Jehovah's Witnesses. Sometimes you have these problems with religions who are too much into love of the neighbor, even when the neighbor would rather be left alone. Now, where does love come into play in Buddhism? Especially, let's talk about Dogen. I've already talked more than an hour, so I try to get close to the point so that you can also ask questions in the end. Let me talk about one of the two texts I've been mentioning right in the beginning, Shoji, life and death, or you could also translate it as living and dying, birth and death, being born and dying. That's a Buddhist term, that's a translation of the Indian samsara. We're always born, we're always dying. This lifetime, the next lifetime, the lifetime after that. But not only that, but also even today. From moment to moment, what I identify with, what I call myself, is always changing. Actually, even on a second-to-second level. And that's why if we try to cling to something, or we say, this is me, and we get attached to that, we're always disappointed because we never, even when we think we had it, we need to let go of it. There's always appearing of something that we didn't maybe wish for, that we didn't plan. Things happen not the way we planned them. And whatever we think we had, we need to let go. So that's why in Buddhism, birth and death are a synonym of samsara, unsatisfactory life. And I want to first talk about the first two sentences of this chapter, which I would render like this in English. The first sentence. With Buddha in life and death, there is no life and death. Life and death is in samsara. So with Buddha in samsara, there is no samsara. There is no samsara means there's only nirvana. Nirvana means that life and death have disappeared. There's no more suffering. The old Buddhists thought that now we're in samsara, one nice day, finally we will have reached nirvana if we practice for a long, long time. That was the goal of the old Buddhists. But at the time of Dogen, Dogen says, no, nirvana is here right now in samsara if there's a Buddha in samsara. With a Buddha in samsara, there's no more samsara. It's nirvana. The question is, where is that Buddha? And the answer is the answer that I heard from my master when I was 25. You need to become that Buddha. You have to live like a Buddha in this lifetime, and you're gonna wake up to the fact that's been nirvana all the time. Maybe that's also what Jesus means when he says the realm of God is among you. At one point he says, well, don't look for the realm of God here or there, or is it coming tomorrow or in 20 years or in 100 years? The realm of God is among you. The question is, do we live there, or do we actually express it in our lives? So I think that's one way you could read that first sentence. With Buddha, that means with you as a Buddha, living and dying, there's no more samsara. It's nirvana. And then there's the second sentence, which is, without a Buddha in life and death, there's no more delusion in life and death. Life and death is more or less a synonym for deluded life, for the deluded world. It's samsara, and samsara means delusion. So if there's no delusion in life and death, it means more or less than the first sentence. There's no more samsara, it's nirvana. It's more, you can't even call it nirvana anymore. It's just life and death without being deluded life and death anymore. So basically, life and death without any problem solved. But the first sentence is exactly the opposite of the first one. The first one says with Buddha in life and death. The second says without Buddha in life and death. Why without Buddha in life and death? Because, and I already talked about it, when you still have the idea there must be a Buddha somewhere, you're going wrong. When you think I'm that Buddha it's all about, you're going even wronger. It's even worse. If you look for the Buddha somewhere, well, you will never find him. You're always going to be disappointed. So it's bad for you. When you think you're the Buddha, nobody can actually convince you of the opposite. At least that happens to some people. They think, I'm a Buddha, I'm a Buddha. And maybe they have a teacher and the teacher says, well, I'm not so quite sure. Maybe you should sit for another 3 years. No, you don't understand me. Even my teacher doesn't understand me. I'm a Buddha. There are people like that. So either way, if you think the Buddha exists somewhere else, you're going in the wrong direction. If you think you're the Buddha, that's also big delusion. If you've completely forgotten about Buddha, that's when there's no more problems for you. The problems arise when you say there's samsara here now, there must be nirvana somewhere else. I'm not a Buddha now, I hope to be a Buddha someday. Or you even say, I'm already a Buddha now, I'm living in nirvana. Here, look at me. What a peaceful, blissful guy I am. No. You need to forget the Buddha. You even have to forget nirvana. And then you realize there's no problem with samsara. Just be natural. Forget yourself. Those are the first 2 sentences of the Shoji chapter. And now about the 2 last paragraphs. The second from the last says, when you let go of your body and mind and throw them into the house of the Buddha, then everything is going to be done from the side of the Buddha. You're going to be carried by Buddha. And without any effort, physical or mental, you will become a Buddha yourself. That's all it takes. That's the second to last paragraph of the chapter. Just let go of your body and mind, throw them into the house of the Buddha, and everything without any effort of your own side is going to be done from the side of the Buddha. Whenever I hear those words, I'm reminded of this first falling in love when I was 16. I was kissed by that girl. I didn't even expect it. From the side of the Buddha, from her side. She how do you say, befreien, liberated me from this kind of prison I'd built around me, and the world looked different. And of course, this feeling of being loved didn't last as long as I thought it would do. And then after I became a Zen monk for a long time, there was no opportunity for romantic love for me, but during the Zen, sometimes you have similar experiences that resemble falling in love. For example, there's a story, and I think I told this story also a lot of times, but I want to tell it once more. What we did today was 4 hours of anti-Z style Zazen. So first hour is 1 hour, and then 15 minutes Zazen, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, 45 minutes. Today it was 4 hours, so it's not so easy, especially for those of you who are maybe used to 30 minutes or 40 minutes, because well, your legs, they work like, how do you say, sand clocks? Is that an English word? Well, in German we have that Sanduhr or Eieruhr. You use them for making eggs, and you see the sand trickling through. And if you're used to 30 minutes of Zazen, that after 30 minutes your legs tell you it's time for the bell. If you are used to 40 minutes, then after 40 minutes. So if you're not used to this, it's quite hard. But well, if you live at Antas, you get used to it. And during session we do 5 of these periods. So we start at 4 in the morning, we sit until 9, there's breakfast, we start again at 10 and sit until 3, there's an afternoon meal, and then we start again at 4 in the afternoon and sit until 9 in this style. And as you get used to it, one day is okay, you can make that. But on the second day it gets uncomfortable. Your knees start to hurt, your ankles start to hurt, your back starts to hurt, everything starts to hurt. And especially if you're a beginner, you ask yourself, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this to me? I could do so many other pleasant things in your life, in my life. I could just leave with the next bus. But somehow you trick yourself into staying. And then on the third day, it's really hell. It feels like hell. And when you think about the fact that the 4th day and the 5th day are still ahead, you're still only in the middle of the session, you seriously start to think that maybe I'm gonna die here on the cushion. This might cost my life. Actually, I've never heard about anybody who died during session. I mean, we have a cushion there, we have a mat on which we sit, there's a roof that protects us from the rain. We have meals to eat. At night you're allowed to lie down and sleep. So compared to situations that other people are in right now on this planet, it's quite comfortable. But, well, tell that to somebody who's during their 3rd day of session. To them it feels like dying anyhow, or at least to me it felt like that. So from the 3rd day on, I start to grind my teeth and count the seconds until the bell might ring. I count my breath, and then I tell myself, well, I count until 100, and if the bell doesn't ring, I'm going to do it until 100 once more. And still the bell doesn't ring, so I grind my teeth even harder. And when the bell rings, then finally I'm released. But 15 minutes later, I'm there again on the cushion. Or I try to quietly move my legs a little bit, and I hope that nobody realizes. Hopefully the master doesn't see me when I'm moving my legs to get out of the pain. But even if that works, at the end of the day I feel bad because I moved around. Or when I grind my teeth, it sometimes happens after session. It happened that after a day or two, the pain in the legs is gone, but my teeth hurt. And I don't know why. And only after a couple of months, I realized I'm always grinding my jaws together. That's why the teeth hurt. I need to stop that. But I can't stop that. I need to fight through the pain, or I can't make it. So I asked my teacher about this problem that I'm always worried on the third day. I can't do it anymore. I need to either grind my teeth or to move a little bit, but otherwise I would die. I'm afraid I'm going to die on the third day. And my teacher said, I don't even see where the problem is. We have a cemetery here. There's just lots of free space. So, in case you die, I can build a grave here for you. I'm going to make a funeral for you. And you're laughing. I thought it was a joke, but at one point I decided, well, okay, let's give it a try. In the worst case, I'm going to have my grave there at Antaichi, but it's a beautiful place to have your grave. It's a nice place to have a grave. And I decided I stopped grinding my teeth, I stopped fighting, I stopped escaping the pain by moving around. I'm going to just leave everything to the Zen and sit there. And the same moment, again, just like being kissed by that pretty girl, or by everything is going to be done by the Buddha. I don't have to do the Zen anymore. I didn't have to do it in the first place. The Zen does the Zen there. I'm still sitting there. The pain is still there, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm still alive. When I realized that for the first time, it was a really strong, for me, a very strong reminder or confirmation that I'm on the right way. After all, this is the right way. I just need to open up a little bit more and give myself up to the Zen. This is the right way. And when I read that second to last paragraph of the Shoji chapter, I get the feeling that Dogen is talking about something like that. Doesn't have to be during the Zen, it can happen in other situations of life, when you give up yourself completely. Throwing yourself into the house of the Buddha means basically throwing yourself completely into the present situation, giving yourself up to the present situation. It can be cooking in the kitchen, it can be working in the field, it can be sitting on the cushion. And then there's something else that carries you, something that supports you when you thought you've already lost everything. You thought you made a step into the abyss, and you realize, no, something holds me. Very important to, at one point, maybe get a taste of that. Otherwise, you will ask yourself, well, why would I continue with that practice? But then, interestingly, there's a last paragraph to the Shoji chapter, and the last paragraph goes something like this. Dogen starts the paragraph saying, there's an easy way to become a Buddha. Here's an easy way to become a Buddha. Don't do anything evil. Or there's an American Zen master called Brad Warner who says, don't be a jerk, which is basically the same thing. Don't be a jerk. It's an easy way to become a Buddha. Don't be a jerk. Don't be attached to life and death. Have compassion for all living beings. Respect those before you. Be kind to those behind you. And a couple of other things. That's all it takes to become a Buddha. There's nothing else. Dogen says that's an easy way to become a Buddha. In practice, it's not as easy as probably most of you know. well, it also depends on what you define as a jerk. If you say, well, a jerk is somebody outside there, it's not about me, then you might think it's easy, but probably as human beings, we are mostly jerks most of the time. So actually it's not so easy to stop being a jerk. A jerk? Ein Idiot, ne? Oder Arschloch oder was auch immer. Also jemand, der man nicht sein will, ist. Ne? Well, basically the Buddhist traditional translation is don't do anything evil, don't do anything bad, don't do anything that you know you shouldn't be doing. And also that's probably something that we often do. We know, well, I shouldn't be doing that, but we still keep doing it. The first time I read that last paragraph, I asked myself, why would Dogen feel it necessary to add this paragraph? He already said everything in the paragraph before, didn't he? He said, let go of body and mind, throw it into the house of the Buddha. Everything else will happen by itself. No more effort from your side, from the side of the Buddha. You're going to be carried and become a Buddha yourself. Why would Dogen then continue? There's an easy way to become a Buddha. When you let go, you are already a Buddha. Why should I try to not do anything bad, not be a jerk? As a Buddha, I can't be possibly a jerk in the first place. Why would Dogen remind us to have compassion or love, he could also say, for all living beings? Respect for those before us, kindness for those behind us. And I think the answer is that there's a difference between being in love and love. At one time, somebody explained the difference to me in the following way. When you're in love, only you know how much you're in love. You're the one who knows if you're in love, and only you know that burning feeling in your breast. And only for you the world is a different one. Everybody else sees still the same world. Only the person in love thinks that the whole world has changed. If you love, that's something that only the other people know, the other person knows. Because love is something that expresses itself in what you do, in your words, in your face. Love needs to be expressed. And love is felt by the other person more than by the person that loves. And I told you about my first love when I was 16. Now I'm married to a different woman that I fell in love with 17 years ago when I lived in a park in Osaka. We were both very much in love with each other, but being married for 17 years, and that's probably something that all of you know, being in love alone is not enough. At one point, after 2 or 3 years, everybody asks themselves probably, why did I ever think that I want to spend the rest of my life with this person? When you were first in love, you never had any doubts. Of course I'm gonna be with her for the rest of my life. At one point you ask yourself, how could I be so stupid? What is missing at that point is love. The practice of love that expresses itself, and that's not asking for something back. Like, for example, the cook I was in the beginning, I asked myself, I'm doing all this work in the kitchen, what do the others do for me? They don't even say thank you after the meal. Also because in the Zen temple, you don't speak during the meal, you don't speak after the meal, during session, you don't speak at all. So you make all this effort for people so they have something nice to eat and they don't even say thank you. I'm always losing something, I'm always giving myself away and nothing is getting back. And practice love doesn't ask for something to return. So at first I was wondering why would Dogen think it necessary to add something to letting go of body and mind and throwing yourself into the house of Buddha. And now I think I know the answers, because throwing yourself into the house of Buddha, letting completely go, that's not so easy. It's not so easy, but you can do it. And when you manage to do it, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, this feeling of being supported when you already thought you would be lost. Somebody catches you. But it's not everything. That's only the start of the relationship with Buddha. And then you're married to the Buddha. Now you have to live as a bodhisattva, and it's a lifelong relationship. And there's matrimonial quarrels with the Buddha. The Buddha bitches at you. The Buddha that was such a lovely, lovely person, you realize, oh, the Buddha has his bad days as well. How do I deal with that? That's where love comes into play. And in the second text, where today I don't have any time to talk about in detail, Bodhisattva Shishoho, Dogen mentions 4 concrete methods. One is giving. Giving something of yourself. But the basis of that means to actually let go of the idea of I, me, mine. As long as we give something to another person, hey, I give this to you. There's still the idea, hey, I did something for you. And maybe there's also the calculation, now he owes me something back. So tomorrow I can ask him for a favor. That's not real giving. Giving is forgetting about the idea of ownership. Dogen says, and that's at first reading that's kind of funny, he says you can even give something that doesn't belong to you. If I gave that cup to you, that wouldn't be a big sacrifice for me because the cup never belonged to you. How can we give something that doesn't belong to us? Well, the question, how do you say that? Well, the question would be, well, what does belong to you in the first place? Like here, that's my watch, but only so long. Actually, my wife bought it for me. She bought it with the money that probably I earned, but like, where's the donation box? I mean, here. Actually, I didn't earn that money. People gave that money to me. My wife buys the watch to me. So I call it my watch, but actually
It's our watch.
it's ours, yeah. The watch came from somewhere. Now when I'm giving this talk and I share the Zen with you, actually I'm sharing my precious, precious time with you. I could be doing so many other things. So where do I have this precious time from? The 24 hours of the day. Well, actually from the same source you have it from. It's actually a gift from the universe. Nobody owns this time. We think it's our time. We own the time. It's not our time. Even with this body, this physical presence, where do I have it from? Do I own it? I don't own it. So when Dogen talks about giving, he talks about a realization that actually there's nothing that I truly can call mine. Or if I do so, everything is mine. But there's nothing that is mine, but then this belongs to you and we make an exchange here. That's giving. The second is loving words. And as an example of loving words, Dogen Zenji mentions the questions, how are you? How are you? That's kind of something that we say day to day in our daily social relationships. How are you? I'm fine. How about you? That's not a big deal. That are not loving words, you could say. But if you ever had a fight with your spouse, you might know the worst thing that your spouse can do to you or that you can do to your spouse is ignoring them. Saying nothing is the worst thing. If you still yell at each other, things are going quite well in the marriage. If you stop even to yell, then there's a problem. So the other day, somebody asked me after my talk, you talked about loving words, but then your teacher At one point he yelled at you and said, "It's not about you, you don't count at all." Isn't there a contradiction? Why didn't your teacher use loving words? But those were loving words. Those were loving words, were exactly the right words for me at the time. I could imagine that actually it wasn't so easy for my teacher to say those words at that time, because he also probably knew I'm a vulnerable person. And if he says that, he knows maybe I could hurt that guy, I could break that guy, but he chose the right words at the right time, and those are loving words. And just to say good morning to a person or good night, those are also loving words. Then the third act of love is to help others. And the basis of helping others is that there are no others. When I help you, it's the left hand helping the right hand. It's not that I'm doing something for you and now you owe me something back. The left hand and the right hand belong together and they need to cooperate. They just too often forget about being the left and the right hand that belong together. But once you realize that, there's no other way for you than to help others. And then the last point is being in harmony, and to that belongs accepting the other person as they are, accepting yourself the way you are. That doesn't mean that you must never try to change or that you must never try to help others, but you need to start at accepting the other and also accepting that sometimes they don't need you, they don't want your help, but sometimes they do. So you also need to be able to let go of the other person when they need to be let go of. Okay, so much from my side today, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you so far. No questions? Or anything else you want to hear?
You needed the practice of Zazen for this?
I think
Very love?
that's a good question. Like, I started with the question, where does love come into play in Buddhism? And I try to explain a little bit of this. In the case of Dogen, he went to China at the age of 24. He came back to Japan at the age of 27. He learned meditation in China. He had a breakthrough experience in China. And when he came back to Japan, for the first couple of years, all he talked about, all he wrote about was Zazen. So there's a Fukan Zazen, the manual about Zazen that he wrote when he was 28. At age, I think, 31, he writes the Bendo-wa, which is all about the importance of Zazen. In the beginning, Zazen is at the center of Dogen's works. But then later in his life, he hardly even mentions the practice of Zazen, and he talks more about, for example, body mind that I talked about here the last time, 2 years ago. The need to arouse body mind, and body mind he defines as the wish to help others, because before you're helped, the wish to save others before you experience salvation yourself. The later Dogen emphasizes body mind even above Zazen. So then the natural question is, so why do we then still practice Zazen and not start with body mind right away? Why don't we start with practicing and living like bodhisattvas the 24 hours of the day, when 1 hour of Zazen makes to take us away, 1 hour from our job, 1 hour from our family, 1 hour from working on the streets with people that need our help. In my case, I think the answer is I'm not a perfect bodhisattva, but I'm trying to do my best. But even to do as little bodhisattva work as I do at present, I need Zazen as a center or a kind of the axis of my life. Without Zazen, I would burn out, I guess. And also without Zazen, I would never ever even have had this realization, oh, other people matter too, or I want to share this. Like, as I told you, when I was young, I never, well, in theory it makes sense to love the neighbor, but in practice, as I found no value in my own life, there was no drive to help others. Once I found a support in Zazen, and I found that, well, I don't know the meaning of life, but actually it's a wonder and it's a great thing that I am alive, and I'm thankful for that. The moment I first felt thankful for the fact that I'm alive, that's where I also felt some kind of compassion for the first time. Oh, I'm saved. I don't know why, but somebody called me. Now I need to share this. I should try to share this. So in my case, there was this, well, in Christianity, it would probably, or I told you already, I think that even a lot of the listeners of Jesus at his time would have found it difficult if somebody tells them, love God, love thy God. How can I possibly love this God who has been poured all this misery on us? But then there's Paul, who loses his eyesight on the way to Damascus and is told by the voice of Jesus to go into this house of a Christian that actually he tried to, how do you say, verfolgen? Persecute, yeah. So Paul was still called Saul at the time. He was persecuting the Christians, but he loses his eyesight, and this voice that says, I'm your Messiah. Go to this house of one of these Christians that you actually were going to persecute. Ask them to lay their hands on your eyes. And then unexpectedly he can see again. And unexpectedly he's saved by exactly those he tried to persecute. So there's this opposite love. Until then, the commandment was love God, but then there's this love pouring down on a person that doesn't even feel deserving. And only then you become able to, well, if I'm loved, this undeserving person, how can I not love my neighbor? So there's this vertical dimension, and then there's the horizontal dimension. And your question would basically, why do we need the vertical dimension? Why can't we just practice in the horizontal dimension all day long, just love our neighbor? Because, at least in my case, and probably in a lot of people, you wouldn't have the strength to continue with that without this vertical dimension, this axis, or this support, this feeling that 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, I can just be there on the cushion. And there's reality. And you wake up to all these delusions that kept you a slave for so long. They are still there. But you need not be a slave to those. Without that practice, in my case, as I already told you, I would find it hard.
So you mean, without Zazen, my life is subjected to secondary things, and by Zazen, I can practice primary.
I don't know if I would use the words primary or secondary. I mean, we're not kind of differentiating the Zen and the Bodhisattva work from each other. I mean, I think there shouldn't be a doubt about that. Living as a Bodhisattva is a primary thing. But I think that there's really very few people who can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Probably no one. And if you have something, some kind of support, probably some inner support, some inner source of energy, then you can continue. And in my case, Zazen is that inner source of energy. Or there's this famous saying by Luther well, it basically goes along the lines, today I'm busy, today I have a lot of things to do, so let me pray double the amount that I usually pray. The normal logic would be, well, if you have lots to do, then cut short your prayers. Why would you waste time on prayers when you're busy? But Luther says, well, today I'm busy, so I'm going to pray the double of amount. Because, well, probably for Luther, the prayer was his source of energy. So for a different person can be something else, but you need something, something that keeps you going, I think.
And makes you feeling it.
Of course. Just like there's this love and practice of love example that I say. So at one point you lose this feeling of being in love. So can you now just from day to day practice love without feeling love? No, of course. So being in love without love won't last. But the other way around, it also doesn't last. Trying to practice love without feeling it in your heart also, you won't continue. So for me, so it's just a metaphor, this kind of being in love with the Buddha. But for me, Zazen is an opportunity to fall in love with the Buddha again and again. And when you get up from the cushion, you have to practice it. Just practicing without having the chance to fall in love again, I wouldn't last. On the other hand, in Antaji, I could sit session every day if I chose to. But that would be just like enjoying yourself, being in love without ever going out with the girl you're in love with. That also would be meaningless. Thank you.
So you say you need other people to practice. Or could you be a hermit? Just be on yourself all the time.
I imagine you could do that, of course, but why would you want to do that? Like in Zen, there's the famous 10 ox herding pictures that describe the way. The first picture, there's somebody lost, looking for his true self, but having no ideas where it could be. And then he sees traces of an ox, which stands for the true self. And after looking for the ox, finally he sees the ox, and then he catches the ox, struggles with the ox, sits on the ox, rides the ox home. So that's basically a person who finally has the experience, he has found what he was looking for. And he's taming the ox. At first you're still not quite balanced, but the ox is tamed. You return home, and then the ox is dissolved, which would be what I said in the beginning, is when there's even no Buddha anymore, there's no nirvana anymore. At one point you think, oh, that is nirvana. Now I got a taste of Buddha. Even that has disappeared. There's only emptiness left. That's the 8th of the 10 pictures. There's emptiness, an empty circle that I wrote into some of the books that I signed today. An empty circle, emptiness. Everything is one. The whole universe and I are one. No differentiation anymore. Your problem is solved. All of the problems in the world are solved. So there's no need to even step out of the house at that point. Because there's no outside of the house. Inside your hermitage, there's the whole universe. When you do Zazen, the whole universe does Zazen. But then the 9th picture is that there's a blossom blooming inside emptiness. Something comes up again. There's the world again. And in the 10th picture, the hermit goes down the mountain and enters the marketplace. Because even though all your problems seem to be solved, and as you're one with the universe, when your problem is solved, the whole universe problems are solved. There are people out there that insist on, my problem is not solved. So why ignore these people? Like sometimes in Mahayana Buddhism it is said that when the Buddha found enlightenment, all of us were enlightened. 2,500 years ago, under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha saw the morning star, and in that moment all of us were enlightened. But what does that count if there's anybody here who says, no, I'm still suffering? And the same is true for like us. When we say, as long as we do Zazen, all of the problems are solved. If there's anybody somewhere out there, a person who says, no, my problem isn't solved yet, then we need to open up to these people. I wouldn't go as far and say, well, you need to go out on the street and talk to each person. Do you have a problem? Can I help you? But at least you should open their door and say, here, I'm there. If you have a problem, come to me. Tell me about it. And sometimes when people keep knocking on your door from day to night, then also sometimes you need to close the door again. So now I need time for myself to sit. Sorry, but come again tomorrow. So you have borders. But yes, I think it's necessary to not stay in the mountains forever, or even, well, if you stay in the mountain as the metaphor, to at least keep the road open and say, here, I'm here in the mountains. If you want to join me, please come.
So you need the problems of the other people.
You have the problems
Do
of the...
you also need the love of other people? Does that mean anything for?
In practice, yes, but you need to be prepared for the day where you can't even count on the love of other people. Everybody will pass. You will lose everyone. And if you pass before the others, then, well, still, at that moment you're alone. So, of course, it's nice if there's people who love you, like, for example, if you have kids and they're still young and they say, I love you, mom, I love you, dad, that's wonderful, that's great. If your spouse tells you that, that's great. If your colleagues at work appreciate your work, that's great. But you need to be prepared where even that doesn't count up anymore. Your spouse leaves you, your children leave you, you lose your job. You need something that supports you even then.
Is that necessary?
Pardon?
Is that necessary? You can all say from, okay, this is the end. Why?
Why what?
No, you are talking about samsara and nirvana.
Yes.
Nirvana is nothingness.
Yes.
And nothingness is the origin of all or the end of all. It does not matter. So why, if others are gone and you are alive, if you want to love, you continue samsara.
Yes.
So why should you want it?
Why? Want what?
Want continue samsara? That is, if you are in the last of the pictures,
Yes.
then you see blossom again in nothingness.
Yes.
Why should you come again in samsara with love?
Because that's nirvana. It's not. There's no two things. It's not two things. There is no nirvana outside of samsara.
Yes, I agree, but I think there is something in your talk from between it. The house of Buddha
Yes.
also doesn't exist. It is between both,
Yes.
or both at the same time.
Both at the same time.
Yeah, you are talking about metaphysical things we cannot imagine with our rationality.
Yes. Maybe. So we're in samsara right now. Nirvana is nowhere else than here. But it makes a difference to have that realization. Being in samsara without knowing it's nirvana. You're still in nirvana nevertheless, but it doesn't count because you think you're in samsara only. And yeah, then you have this tiny realization, or maybe it's a big realization, actually this is actually nirvana. And in the beginning, and that's kind of the metaphor with love, that everything seems changed and you think you have grasped something special. And you might even think that you left samsara behind. But over time you realize, actually I'm still in samsara. Not because I lost that nirvana that I thought I got, but because this is nirvana. Nirvana is where samsara happens.
Oh, okay, but you don't need love. Love is automatically the same. If you are thinking about love,
Yes.
you continue samsara. We are thinking in time.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean with love. If you understand love as attachment,
Yes.
wanting somebody,
Okay.
clinging somebody, then of course love is something that you could call samsaric. It's a delusion. That's the reason why a lot of Buddhists try to avoid the word, because it's so strong. Means I love you, means I want you. I want you to be mine. I don't want to let you go. I want you to love me, and I want you to not love anybody beside me. Or that is even the Old Testament God. You must have me as your God, and you must not have any other gods. I'm a jealous God. That's problematic. That's why Buddhists usually prefer to say compassion. And that includes being able to let the other person go, let the other person be, not trying to possess you. Have compassion with you, that means I don't want to possess you. So that's the love I tried to talk about today.
I have a very different question.
Yes.
I'm just really curious what the practice of the Christian meditation style like for Zen is like. What did you do during the sessions where you had the Christian meditation? I'm just really curious. Did you sit in posture?
The same.
Ah, yeah, it was Zen basically. You just gave it a different
was
name.
Zen.
Okay.
At the same time, it was Christian. Why? Ich komme nochmal, ich muss es Deutsch sagen. Vielleicht verstehen die meisten Deutsch.
Ja, ich verstehe es auch.
One thing from yes.
Diese Konzeption von dir ist alttestamentarisch, diese Liebe. Jesus hat diese Antwort gegeben, aber Jesus ging es eigentlich um das Reich Gottes. Und das Reich Gottes ist, jetzt sage ich es vom Zen her, das Zusammen von Lehre und Form. Das ist nämlich die Beschreibung des Paradieses. Im Paradies, christliche Mythos, im Paradies ist Lehre und Form identisch. So wird das beschrieben. Und Jesus will das Reich Gottes, und dieses Reich Gottes ist sofort da, weil diese Lehre und Form in der Schöpfung als Grundprinzip anwesend ist. Und in Jesus, Gott und Mensch, wahrer Gott und wahrer Mensch, auch Lehre und Form identisch sind, aber als Person oder zugeschnitten auf Person.
Ist das Lehre mit 2 E oder mit H?
Lehre mit 2 E.
Ja.
Transzendenz ist auch im Christentum nicht beschreibbar. Meister Eckhart, Gott ist ein lauter Nichts. Das haben alle Mystiker so erfahren. Das kann man nicht beschreiben, das ist nicht definiert, weil es keine Grenze hat. Und das bedeutet, komme auf den Satz, ich habe jetzt nicht die Frage noch nicht ganz im Kopf, aber Sie fragen nochmal. Bitte, aber nicht jetzt, sondern nachher. Das Zusammen von Lehre und Form ergibt Liebe. Das war Ihre Frage. Das heißt, Lehre und Form kann man übersetzen in Transzendenz und Immanenz. Die Welt und die Transzendenz. Und dieses beides zusammen, die Identität von Lehre und Form, ist im Christentum oder in der christlichen Philosophie das Zusammen von die Identität von Transzendenz und Immanenz. Wenn Transzendenz und Immanenz zusammenkommen, entsteht Liebe. Und Liebe, ich definiere Liebe so, Liebe ist das, was man in der Immanenz tut, das, was man in der Immanenz notwendig tut. Das, was in der Immanenz die Not wendet, das ist Liebe. Und dieses kommt zustande, wenn Transzendenz und Immanenz identisch werden, was wir in der Meditation üben. Denn wir holen die Transzendenz in die Immanenz durch unsere Übung. Das heißt, wir holen die Null ich nenne Transzendenz 0 und die Immanenz die 1 und wir holen die 0 zur 1. Wie ein Computer. Der Computer geht nicht ohne 1 und 0. Und so geht auch Liebe nicht ohne 1 und 0. Das heißt, wenn 1 und 0 zusammenkommen in unserer Übung und wir müssen nur üben, weil wir die 1 haben. Wenn das zusammenkommt, entsteht Chi. Und Chi ist das, was man im Christentum nennt, Heiligen Geist. Und das heißt, der Geist der Liebe entsteht dann, wenn die Transzendenz als 0 zur Immanenz als 1 kommt. Dann entsteht Liebe. Das ist für mich Liebe. Und Liebe, es ist eine schöne Geschichte im Neuen Testament, da fragt man im Himmel, kommen also alle in den Himmel und Jesus sagt dann zu denen im Himmel, ihr habt mich besucht im Gefängnis, ihr habt mich besucht im Krankenhaus und die Leute fragen, wo haben wir dich besucht und wann haben wir dich besucht? Das heißt, sie wissen es nicht. Das heißt, wenn wir etwas tun, wenn wir der Notwendigkeit des Tuns folgen, wissen wir es nicht. Und sobald wir es wissen, ist ein Interesse da und dann ist es keine Liebe mehr. Und das bedeutet, wir müssen davon ausgehen, dann verstehen wir dieses ganze Konstrukt, Lehre ist Form und Form ist Lehre, das bedeutet gleichzeitig Transzendenz ist Immanenz und Immanenz ist Transzendenz und Gott ist Mensch und der Mensch ist Gott. Ja? Und von dieser Basis aus können wir das verstehen.
Sie haben meine Frage viel tiefer beantwortet als gemeint habe. Aber das ist ganz schön.
Und das ist, wenn man von der christlichen Theologie ausgeht, die Präexistenz von uns allen und die Präexistenz von Jesus. Also als Grundprinzip, das was also im Tympanon, in den Domen überall am Eingang ist, der Pantokreator, Jesus als Pantokreator, das zeigt das Grundprinzip von Lehre ist Form und Form ist Lehre. Und weil dieser Jesus die Lehre repräsentiert in der Integration der Form, deswegen hat er im Tympanon nie Haare. Er hat keine Haare im Tympanon. Warum? Weil das die bloße Immanenz darstellt. Deswegen haben wir auch keine Haare. Das ist so, denn auch in der Christin stellt man eine Tonsur. Und die Tonsur heißt, man verzichtet auf die bloße Immanenz, also auf die Nur-Immanenz, die es eigentlich gar nicht gibt, sondern die gibt es nur deswegen, weil wir ein Ego haben und dieses Ego treibt Immanenz und Transzendenz auseinander. Das ist die Geschichte des Paradieses. Das heißt, wir müssen dieses Ego entleeren, dass die beiden Dinge wieder zusammenkommen. Und das ist unsere Übung.
Pater Lasson hat auf diese Frage geantwortet. Es gibt kein,
Ja, das
es gibt kein christlicher oder buddhistischer Schnupfen.
So ist das. So ist das. Das heißt, die Wirklichkeit und was wir in der Physik jetzt lernen können, da gibt es ein gutes deutsches Buch über Hans-Peter Dürren, ich weiß nicht mehr, wie der Titel heißt, der war Mitarbeiter von Heisenberg. Was wir von Max Planck lernen können, ist, dass diese Null ja auch in der materiellen Eins drin ist. Das heißt, wir haben heute durchgehend ein Einverständnis, dass diese 0 und 1 überall, Lehre und Form überall, auch in der Materie, so gedacht wird. Und das bedeutet, dass wir, wenn wir jetzt diese Krise überleben, die es so heute gibt, dass wir in ein sehr religiöses Zeitalter reingehen, in der diese 0 wieder in die Immanenz, in die 1 integriert wird und wir dann ganz selbstverständlich sitzen werden. Und warum sitzen wir denn? Wenn wir diese 0 und diese 1 in die Zeit übertragen, heißt das, die 1 ist ganz annehmen. Wir nehmen diese Welt ganz an. Total. Freude, Leid, alles was es gibt und auf uns zukommt, kommt auf uns zu. Und aber das Zweite, um Mensch bleiben zu können, müssen wir gleichzeitig dieses Annehmen fallen lassen. Das hast du im Buch, jetzt im Neuen, auch schön geschrieben. Ganz fallen lassen. Das heißt, die Null, die Transzendenz, die Lehre erlaubt uns, dieses fallen zu lassen. Wenn wir das nicht fallen lassen können, können wir nicht Mensch sein. Das heißt, wenn man das in die Zeit übersetzt, Lehre und Form bedeutet in der Zeit ganz annehmen, ganz fallen lassen und dann kommt das Dritte. Dann ereignet sich, was geschieht. Ich sage extra, dann ereignet sich, was geschieht. Es geschehen natürlich immer Sachen, aber sie sind nicht unsere Sachen. Wenn es sich ereignet, Deutsch, es ereignet sich, ich mache mir das zu eigen. Ich kann mir das nur dann zu eigen machen, wenn ich nicht überrollt werde. Das heißt, ich nehme an, ich lasse fallen und dann kommt das, was kommt. Und dieses, was kommt in diesem Zusammenhang, bezeichne ich als Liebe. Und Liebe ist so wenig definierbar wie Transzendenz oder so wenig definierbar wie Lehre. Denn Liebe ist leer. Aber sie hat Form.
Oder von
Ja.
Hij bedoelt links. Oh, ja, ik dacht de leraar. De les. Dus emptiness. Ja, oké.
Nein. Lehre mit 2 E. Was manchmal kein Unterschied ist. Also das ist.
Dat doen die Joden. Die hebben niet zijn Tonsur, die hebben een keppeltje.
Also wir müssen ausgehen von Lehre ist Form und Form ist Lehre und wir müssen das mit Transzendenz und Immanenz philosophisch übersetzen. Und Reich Gottes, wenn Jesus vom Reich Jesus hat nicht eigentlich er hat natürlich Vater, weil man das besser liebt und vielleicht hat er auch da ein Defizit gehabt, weil man das besser objektivieren kann, weil wir ja in der Immanenz alle Dinge objektivieren. Wir können ja über die Transzendenz nicht reden oder wir reden immer nur uneigentlich über die Transzendenz, weil die Sprache nicht hinreicht. Und das bedeutet, wir Reich Gottes, das ist die eigentliche Botschaft von Jesus und nicht so sehr Vater, das hat er auch genug. Aber Reich Gottes, er verkündet Reich Gottes, also dieses Zusammen von Lehre und Form, und er selbst ist Reich Gottes im Zusammen von Lehre und Form. Ja, und dann kann man 1000 Buddhas haben, die alle dieses sind. Und die alle dieses üben das. Und wir sind es auch schon, weil grundsätzlich die Schöpfung so geschaffen ist. Wir sind so und wir üben es und wir bringen es in die Realität. Und das, was du so gesagt hast, weißt du, das habe ich schon 100-mal gehört von wem? Von den christlichen Theologen, die genau dieses so argumentieren. Ja. Und oftmals eben auch linearlogisch versuchen, das zu erklären. Aber man kann das linearlogisch nicht erklären. Und warum? Die Immanenz ist das totale, die bloße Immanenz ist der totale Gegensatz von der Transzendenz, der totale. Und wir können das linearlogisch nicht zusammenbringen. Das ist aristotelisch nicht möglich. Und das bedeutet, dass wir das Koran haben und dass wir immer vom Reich Gottes ist ein Koran, Jesus ist ein Koran, unser Leben ist ein Koran. Das heißt, wir müssen zwei Sachen zusammenbringen, die wir linearlogisch nicht zusammenbringen können. Und deswegen ist, wenn wir darüber reden, es äußerst missverständlich, denn jeder erwartet, dass er das versteht, was er sagt. Aber er versteht es ja selbst nicht. Aber wir müssen es trotzdem sagen. Also das heißt, wir müssen dann, der Behelfsbegriff ist dann Intuition. Wir sagen dann, man muss intuitiv. Was bedeutet intuitiv? Keiner weiß das. Aber es ist so, dass wir in uns ja diese Lehre leben. Und alle, und das ist die gemeinsame Grundlage von uns allen. Ja? Und deswegen sind wir auch nicht glücklich, wenn jemand leidet, weil er ja in seiner Transzendenz gehemmt ist durch dieses Leiden oder weil seine Form den Inhalt stört oder weil sein Ego den Inhalt stört. Und das heißt, wir sind immer nur glücklich, wenn die Transzendenz in allen realisiert wird. Und deswegen ist es gar nicht schwer, es ist nicht schwer, Bodhisattva zu sein. Es ist echt nicht schwer, Bodhisattva zu sein. Dann, wenn ich aus meiner Transzendenz lebe, aber das muss ich üben.
Aber endet das nicht alles bei Form ist Form?
Bitte?
Form ist Form.
Wenn man sagen würde, Form ist Form und die Transzendenz
Das ist doch eigentlich das Wesentliche für die Liebe.
Nein, das Wesentliche für die Liebe ist,
Aus
dass
der
beides
Erfahrung,
zusammenkommt.
Form ist Lehre, Lehre ist
Ja.
Form, ergibt sich dann Form ist Form.
Neue Form. Neue
Form ist gleich Form. Und das ist die Liebe. Die sind nicht getrennt voneinander.
Nein, das
Es gibt kein getrenntes Ich, es gibt kein getrenntes Objekt.
aber wir können das nicht mehr beweisen. Also das ist linearlogisch jenseits nicht mehr, sondern es ist auch eine Sprachsache. Wir können,
Ja, über den Verstand.
Ja, wir können das
der Verstand
nicht,
läuft ja immer der Erfahrung hinterher.
ja, ja,
Der Verstand kann die Erfahrung nicht voll fassen.
niemals.
Das Wort auch nicht.
Niemals, geht nie. Niemals.
Denkst du jetzt gerade an das Blumengirlanden-Sutra, wenn du das sagst? Form ist Form.
Form ist Form. Da ist kein Unterschied.
Ja, hast du da irgendeine buddhistische
Das ist
Lehre
nicht-
im Kopf oder sagst du das
Das
jetzt
ist doch die vierte Erfahrung.
die vierte
Der
Erfahrung?
letzte Punkt ist Form ist Form.
Der letzte Punkt, man geht wieder in die Form rein, aber nachdem man das alles durchlaufen hat.
Ja, aber man erkennt dann, dass die Formen nicht getrennt voneinander sind, sondern dass das alles verbunden ist.
Ja.
Das Ego ist nicht Ego, ich, Ego, sondern es gibt nur die Verbundenheit.
Dennoch ist die Form da als Unterschied.
Ja, die Form ist
Auch dann, ja, auch dann.
Aber sie ist nicht getrennt.
Aber es ist nicht getrennt. Ja. 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 Das heißt, es ist, ich komme zu dem Bild von Leiter in Colmar mit dem Auferstandenen, Isenheimer Altar, wo zwar alles durchleuchtet ist von der Transzendenz,
Ja.
aber die Form des Schicksals bleibt. Also die Form
Also
bleibt.
der Weg geht über die Transzendenz und über die
In die-
Erfahrung der Leerheit in die
Ja,
Alltagsrealität,
ja,
wo wir dann aber mit einem neuen Verständnis das sehen, was wir vorher schon gesehen haben, aber wir sehen es anders.
ja, das nennt Jesus Reich Gottes.
Oder Nirvana.
Oder Ja, das kann man dann nennen, wie man will. Man nennt es dann, wenn man es erfahren hat, gar nicht mehr. Sondern man lebt dann so, wie man lebt. Und ist dann kein Unterschied mehr. Es ist kein...
Waarom Atman?
Bitte?
Waarom Atman? Nicht het Atman?
Ach so, ja.
Dat
Wie immer man das nennt. Es ist immer falsch. Also unsere Benennungen sind am Ende nicht mehr notwendig und sie fallen ab. Sie fallen ab wie Blätter vom Baum.
So a beautiful last sentence, I think.
Bitte?
Es ist ein ganz schöner Schluss, ja, Schlusssatz.
Yeah, thank you very much. Vielen Dank
Thank you very much.
für die Teilnahme. Esther hat ja auch eine Sangha, die sich, wenn ich nicht hier bin, trifft. Und wenn ich das nächste Mal wieder in der Gegend bin, werde ich mich bei Esther melden und entweder hier oder im Rosenhof können wir uns wieder treffen.
Gerne.
Yay!